to have you with us in studio. What do you think of that, the ghost of the arms deal coming back to haunt us, the usefulness of that?
I think that you know, this case is so important because I think for the majority of South Africans for a very long time there was just a feeling that the alleged you know, misdeeds of the politically powerful were seemingly above the rule of law and were seemingly above interrogation and investigation and prosecution. And what's important here is that when Deputy Judge President Aubrey Ledwaba gave the initial spy tapes ruling in 2016, he said that Mokotedi Mshe, who made the decision to withdraw the Zuma prosecution, hadn't thought about what ordinary people would think about the principle of equality before the law, and how Zuma's treatment would make them feel that potentially the politically powerful were somehow immune from that concept of equality before the law. And Shaun Abrahams actually referenced that in his statement today, 11 minutes that will change our history forever. Very short statement. After 8 years of tumultuous legal fights, 11 minutes was all it took for Jacob Zuma to be put back in the dock.
And how do we get to this point where the man who, I think the perception has been strong that he was pro-Zuma, now today announcing that he believes this is a winnable case in court?
I mean, I think it was very interesting because when the Nkosana golden handshake deal was challenged in court, of course that was the predecessor of Shaun Abrahams, there was this rhetoric that came from a number of people, including Kassak, that essentially Shaun Abrahams was Shaun the sheep, that he was a puppet of the president and that they didn't believe that you know, he would do the right thing. The North Gauteng High Court, in that ruling that they gave on Nkosana's golden handshake, in which they invalidated Shaun Abrahams' appointment and said he's actually not supposed to be in this position, said they had certain misgivings that he had consistently taken the side of then President Jacob Zuma in a number of cases. When he filed his appeal to the Constitutional Court, which could actually be decided as early as next week, Shaun Abrahams said, you know, I had actually been writing to Michael Hulley and the lawyers when it became apparent that we were going to lose the spy tapes challenge in the appeal court. I was the person who identified that we'd relied on the wrong statutes. And here's evidence that I engaged with the Hawks. We've tracked down the witnesses. I told Hulley he couldn't have the extra time he wanted to make representations. So that this perception that I am a sheep is actually not necessarily fair. But as you point out, it is a widespread perception. And I think, you know, we'll know in the next few days, I think, Francis, whether or not the Constitutional Court agrees that, you know, his position remains, he was invalidly appointed. But whatever happens, at least he is now in the position where after a series of NPA leaders that sort of fell by the wayside and arguably failed to demonstrate palpable independence, you know, he's made a decision that shows that there is hope for the NPA and there is hope that it's going to have the kind of leadership that the Constitution promises it will have.
Could it be even more powerful that he's the one to do it? Because his lawyers, and maybe there was a point in there, argued that if somebody new came in and said we're going to prosecute Zuma, they'll look like they are responding to the new regime. Well, whatever they did, they'd be between a rock and a hard place, but maybe powerful that it's Shaun Abrahams.
I think what's going to be interesting is we've seen the President Stalingrad strategy at work. He is, as his lawyer Kemche Kemp so famously said in a court in KwaZulu-Natal all those years ago, we will fight them in every room, in every street, in every house. And that has been the pathology of this Zuma litigation strategy. So it is very possible that the president then brings a legal challenge now to Shaun Abrahams' decision and says, well, you know, his appointment was invalid. Maybe he wasn't the right person to be making this decision. You know, his back against the wall was against the wall, and maybe this was a step in political expediency. But what is apparent is that if and when there is a legal challenge or a review of Shaun Abrahams' decision, he has done everything he can to make sure that his decision will withstand review. So we've got Billy Downer on that team of prosecutors, including Moipone Norco and Raymond Matenjwa, who were advising Shaun Abrahams. They went through the evidence, and the NPA was able to satisfy itself on that legal prerequisite of a representations process, that the only time you withdraw a prosecution is when you realize actually you don't have good prospects of success in getting a conviction. And they've turned around and said, Shaun Abrahams saying today, we do believe we have good prospects of success. We do believe we will convict the former president of corruption, and more seriously, of course, racketeering, which obviously carries with it a 25-year prison sentence.
And we have to talk about his age. But firstly, going back, he also said that the representations have raised new concerns about the prosecutors themselves. Presumably that'll all have to come out in court, all these technical things, the spy tapes, if they're admissible. Do you expect it to be a lot of technical stuff, and then maybe we get to the evidence? And is there any idea on timeframes for that?
I think we're going to see a lot of legal challenges. We've seen our first legal challenge in the Western Cape High Court by an NGO saying that there must be a permanent stay of prosecution for the president's case. Zuma himself may bring a review. He's definitely going to challenge the racketeering charges. He's indicated that in letters from his lawyers to Shaun Abrahams, prior to that to Multibillion-rand share. And he's going to himself bring a permanent stay of prosecution, and he'll argue, look, it's all these years later, you know, justice delayed, justice denied, you know, and we're going to see those battles playing out. So he is going to be in court in the next few days. He's going to be summoned to appear in court. He's going to have to appear in court. The bail process will happen. Of course, there will be an amount agreed upon. It's going to be a massively humiliating experience for him. And then, of course, he'll have the opportunity to bring all this other litigation. But I think the big question for me really is the president going to continue to have seemingly untrammeled state funding in terms of pursuing his Stalingrad strategy? Because if there's money to do this, we are going to see numerous legal challenges before we get to a stage where a witness opens their mouth. And I think that's going to be a very pressing issue for President Ramaphosa to address.
Well, what is the possibility of that? That was based on an agreement with former President Thabo Mbeki.
Well, we have to.
How solid is that?
We have to see this deal. We haven't seen this deal.
This is that the state pays. Let's just
exactly
clarify. For everything.
And of course, Julius Malema, EFF leader, pushing very hard, the president very hard, saying, well, what are you basing this on? It appears to be based on the State Attorneys Act. And Musi Maimane indicating that it's very possible that they will bring a legal challenge to that deal, because it's just simply untenable for ordinary South Africans to keep sponsoring Jacob Zuma's fight against the prosecution case, which very much on the allegations that the state have made vested around his personal and private interests. You know, the State Attorneys Act exists, for example, if you, Francis, are a police officer and you get involved in the arrest of someone and they accuse you of torturing them. Yeah. And the state then says, you know, we believe Francis, she's a police officer, obviously in the realm of her work, she's going to face these kind of allegations. We'll defend her. If she's found guilty, we'll pay her. If she's found guilty, she'll have to pay it back. So that's why the law exists. I think there's a definitive legal challenge that can be brought against an official who's accused of acting in their personal capacity in the furtherance of corrupt intent from getting money, which is completely outside the constitutional mandate of what they should be doing in the first place. And the Arno Lemoy judgment, very recent, Judge Veldhuizen turning around and refusing funding for those brigadiers and saying, you know, you're alleged to have acted in your personal capacity, we can't fund you. So I think if there is a legal challenge, I don't see the president winning it, the former president.
Especially if one of your arguments is about delayed justice when you're in the courts delaying your own day in court. But there's a final irony we have to talk about with Andrew Feinstein. We were talking about the money in the arms deal. In today's terms, not that much. Jacob Zuma, I think he took 3 million, 4 million. But how much has he already spent on those legal fees? That's something that you've been looking at.
You know what, the tragedy, you know, like when Bulelani Nguka made that decision against the advice of his own prosecutors not to put Jacob Zuma in the dock with Shabir Sheikh, he did irreparable damage not only to the NPA but to the country and its economy. Because at that stage, those allegations about tint and the so-called, you know, the R500,000 bribe, it was about that money was being used allegedly in the version of the state by Zuma to fund renovations to Nkandla. And how many years later? 240 million rand. And then, of course, we know that about 32.4 million rand was spent on up until now on Zuma's various fights against the DA's review of the decision not to prosecute, and also on him fighting search and seizure warrants, fighting mutual legal assistance requests, bringing, you know, that application that he should have been allowed to make representations that led to the Nicholson ruling that cost Mbeki his job. So, you know, there was in taking in not taking a decision at that stage, when before all of this stuff happened, that the then, you know, Deputy President, the former tourism MEC, should answer to these allegations that he was essentially a kept politician. This pathology of allegedly being a kept politician on the scale of the Guptas, on the scale of state capture, in the Nkandla case, it all unraveled.
All right, and this is going to play out, as you say. It depends on how deep the pockets are that are provided by the state. Thank you so much. Karyn Maugh from the Financial Mail. We take a short break.